Arr, matey. Tonight's double feature takes us to the high seas, where honor is tested, authority is challenged, and adventure is forged in salt and blood. First up is 1935's Mutiny on the Bounty, a sweeping epic of tyranny versus conscience, anchored by Charles Laughton's unforgettable Captain Bligh and a young Clark Gable standing up to absolute power. Famously, Laughton so terrified the cast during production that even between takes, he refused to break character, creating an atmosphere as oppressive as the ship itself. Then we set sail with Errol Flynn and Captain Bligh, the film that helped define the swashbuckler romantic. Flynn was such an unknown at the time that the studio barely promoted him, only to watch him become a star overnight. Together, these films represent Hollywood at its most grand and idealistic, when the ocean became a stage for moral conflict, daring escapes, and the eternal question, when does obedience become injustice? Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cinema 100, and this is Mutiny on the Bounty and Captain Bligh.
Keep a weather eye open for pirates.
Very well, sir.
I shall have the seas swept clean of them, particularly one.
Did you ever happen to hear of a wild rogue named Blood?
Peter Blood?
Peter Blood.
Peter Blood.
No, I don't know him.
And who might that be, do you suppose?
That is your Captain Blood.
It's the world against us.
Aye, aye, Peter.
Aye, aye, Peter. And us against the world.
Murdering butcher. I've had enough of this blood ship. He's the master of life and death on the quarterdeck above the angels. Ahoy! Clear! I'm sick of blood. Bloody backs, bloody faces. Why are you doing your last command on this ship? We'll be men to get up with your hang for it.
Casting me adrift 3,500 miles from a port of call. You're sending me to my doom, eh? Well, you're wrong, Christian. I'll take this boat as she floats to England if I must. I'll live to see you, all of you, hanging from the highest yard arm in the British fleet.
Choices and consequences. Both movies we watched this week have choices and consequences, Will. We watched two movies this week, Mutiny on the Bounty and Captain Bligh. It's not a horror film. It's an adventure excursion film. Will, I usually come on and say these are two very different films. I thought they are two very different films in the sense of, I think, the seriousness level you should take them. One, I think you should take a little more serious than the other one. Maybe that's just my opinion. We'll get there in a second. But this was a great double feature pick because this is action adventure to its fullest on both sides of the coin. What was your viewing experience, Will, when we talk about the Mutiny on the Bounty and Captain Bligh?
Yeah, so you said, it's funny that you said both sides of the coin there, because that's kind of how I've been thinking about these two films in regards to like justice and revenge. Like it's, because Mutiny on the Bounty is a lot more about like revenge, right? Captain Bligh wants his blood. He wants to get Clark Gable and make him pay for the mutiny. And then on the other side, you have Errol Flynn, who, Captain Bligh, who's kind of reckoning with the things that have brought him to this point when we get to the end of the movie. So he, it feels a lot more like justice when we're talking about Captain Bligh when we get to the end of the movie. Whereas in Mutiny on the Bounty, we're kind of talking about revenge. So for me, they were great two movies to watch together, even though there are some pretty significant differences about the seriousness of both of them. So.
Yeah, and I'm just going to go ahead and ask it now. Of the two films, which one did you like better?
I've been having a hard time deciding, honestly, because
I didn't think we were going here.
Yeah, no, I liked both films a lot. I think one is a lot more fun. One is a lot more rewatchable, meaning Captain Bligh, because I think it's a more fun movie. It's something you could sit down and kind of throw on in the background, so to speak. Yeah. Whereas Mutiny on the Bounty, you got to sit down. You got to be kind of thinking about the consequences and the bigger picture of what they might be trying to say there. So it's hard to pick because I like both these movies. So yeah.
I got to be honest. I did not expect you to like Captain Bligh as much as you are presenting it. It felt like the John Wayne Green Berets type thing that you push back against. And and I know there's a place for it, and you like it too. Like I know you like your action films, right? I'm not saying that you would just disregard those. I just didn't think you would take it as serious as the Mutiny on the Bounty.
Sure.
And I did take that movie a little serious. Now, from my research, I realized that there's some historical inaccuracies there, but like I'm okay with that because the movie wasn't me trying to like contemplate, late 18th century and where the world was at. It's about justice and revenge and motives and characters and how human beings, kind of navigate all those waters together. I do think there was more interesting like character arcs in the Mutiny on the Bounty. And because of those, I found that movie to be taken a little more serious than Captain Blood. But I do enjoy Captain Blood. I thought the movie was fun, just like you did. But I'm interested, or I'm a little curious to hear when we get into the breakdown here as to why you think they're more neck and neck than maybe I do. So
Okay.
So with all that being said, let's dive into our first film, Will, if we can. Mutiny on the Bounty. Release date, November 8th, 1935. Tagline reads, First Mate Fletcher Christian leads a revolt against his sadistic commander, Captain Bligh, in this classic seafaring adventure based on the real-life 1789 mutiny. So this is based on a true story. Directed, Will, by Frank Lloyd. Distributed by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, otherwise known as MGM. Runtime, 2 hours, 13 minutes. We'll talk about that here in just a second. Starring Charles Laughton as Captain William Bligh, Clark Gable as Fletcher Christian, and Will, maybe a little help here if you know it or not. I'm going to call him Frank, but let's just say Franchot Tone. Is that French, you believe?
Yeah, I'm sure it's French. I'm sure the T is silent. Frank sounds great.
Let's go with Frank. Frank Tone. Midshipman Roger Byam. Letterboxd rating 3.7. Rotten Tomatoes rating of 96% by the critics, 84% by audience members. Will, I'm going to lead off here if I can. My fill in the blank for my initial reaction and my viewing experience, and maybe you're going to be shocked to see how far I'm going in this direction with this movie. I put powerhouse of a film. I really believe it. I first of all, on the technical side of things, 1935, this looked amazing.
Absolutely.
The way this thing was shot, I'm looking at some of these things and I'm like, okay, this in a soundstage, this in the ocean, is this in Lake Michigan? Like, what are they doing here? Like, this looked very real. They must have mounted cameras on, top of lofts and things of that nature, in these pirate or in these cruise, whatever they are, these ships. I just thought technically it looked amazing. And again, I love when actors are on screen with actors and they both know their craft. Clark Gable, Charles Laughton, and there's an interesting thing that I did not know existed. Will, there was some, apparently these two have major off-screen issues that I did not realize. They did not like each other in Hollywood. We'll get to that. But then there's the third guy, Frank Tone. And if I am stooging off my one hot take, Frank Tone might have stole the whole movie. Like, he was that good of an actor. So, I like the plot. I like the technical look to it. And then you get, in my opinion, 3 really, really good performances here. And I thought it just made for what I was shocked because I was dreading watching these 2 movies, Will. I don't know why. I just was. Even though we drafted them, it just, the artwork, the way it felt, I was like, oh, this is going to be a tough double feature. And I was pleasantly surprised that it wasn't. So powerhouse of a film is my fill in the blank word. What say you?
Yeah, I think I would go with, it's like a acting school, because the three main performances, and ironically all 3 of these gentlemen get nominated for their leading role for the Oscar. It was like every scene that they were in together, and it's kind of the perfect chemistry, right? Because you have when you have these three playing off each other, a lot of times it's one-on-one. So not all three are playing off each other at the same time. It's more like you get Bligh and Christian, and then you get Christian and Byam, and then you get Byam and Bligh at the end of the movie. And the way that they're all allowed to play off each other, the way they all have their own space to kind of shine. I just thought it was like a school of acting here. Like, this is by far probably, I would say, of like the three performances, like the best three performances in one single movie that we've seen. We've seen some good pairings, but like top billing three people, I mean, you can't ask for much more than this.
Yeah, and it's funny because like I don't know where you're at on Frank Tone, but I don't know anything about this gentleman prior. I don't know much about him afterwards. I it's just one of those things where I'm sitting here watching this man on screen with Charles Laughton, with Clark Gable, and not only does he feel like he belongs, but at times it's like, holy crap, that was, especially at the end when we get to his speeches, right? And, I'm a sucker for a good monologue because it's a chance for them to act. It's a chance for, we talked about it a little bit with Katharine Hepburn when we were looking at, what was it? Morning Glory.
There it is. Yep.
Morning Glory, yeah. In her chance, she had a couple opportunities in that movie to kind of showcase, well, the whole movie for her was a showcase, but you know what I mean? Specifically when she's revealing the Shakespeare play there, when she's kind of performing there. Right. I think these moments can be made kind of make or break, and sometimes actors don't always come up to the call. And in this case, in this movie, when you have to come to work and Gable's on set and Laughton's on set, and you're sitting there with Frank Lloyd and he's like, okay, man, deliver, and he does, and you're like, wow. Sometimes maybe I'm in hyperbole here with my hot take, but that's why it's a hot take, just for the fact that because he delivered and you are captivated by it, you think he belongs. So you're right. I think these are the three. What would you say would be the best ensemble outside of this movie that we've watched so far? Joan Crawford and Shear? Like, what are we looking at?
Yeah. Oh man, that's tough. It's funny because my first thought went immediately to the Marx Brothers because you have three people kind of playing off of each other with an incredible chemistry. I think that's an interesting comparison point just because of the 3 for 3.
What about Colbert and Gable? It Happened One Night. Would you say that's probably the next one?
Yeah, that's probably the next one. I think if you also look at City Lights, when you have Chaplin and was it
Virginia Woolf?
Yes. When you have those two kind of playing off of each other with the limitations that they have, kind of set in the film with her being a blind character, that was also kind of incredible. So,
no, totally agree. I went as high as 4.5.
Okay.
This is how I know I could have been. Sometimes I set myself up for these things. It's either going to be a torturous 2.5 hours watch, or it's going to be like, holy crap, that was 2 hours and 15 minutes. And maybe I would have trimmed 15 minutes of that movie off, which, you could argue that could be done. But like for the most part, there's a place for it as well. I don't know. 4.5. What about you?
Yeah, that's kind of, I've been in between a 4 and a 4.5 on both of these.
Okay.
Pretty much all day as I've been kind of thinking and getting ready for the podcast. I think at the end of the day, like if I had to choose one, it's going to be Mutiny on the Bounty, and I'd probably give it a 4.5. So I'm right there with you.
We talked about Frank Tone a little bit. Do we want to dive in more with Charles Laughton and Clark Gable or any of the other performances? Talk about this cast. Talk about the performances, the acting overall. To me, because we've kind of spoken, about how great the three performances are.
Yeah,
they're all very different characters, right?
Right.
What I liked about Charles Laughton and Clark Gable's characters is that, Gable early on is very loyal to the handbook, right? Mm-hmm. And then we find out that Byam is even more loyal to the handbook than Gable is, because Gable can be pushed to his limits. Charles Laughton, I kind of wanted, and I think in today's version of this, we would get a little bit more exposition for the reasons of his, treatment of his authority and his insubordinates. You know what I mean? Like the treatment of that. I think we'd get a little more exposition. I would have liked this here because I think someone like Laughton could deliver that. But regardless, we sit in 1935, and I just thought because they all had definitive characters, it really helped their performances. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting. You've got the three different layers too, where you have Bligh, who's, the most experienced of the three, kind of the elder statesman, the captain. And then you have Fletcher Christian. Yeah.
Fletcher Christian. Yep.
Yeah. You have him. He's been around a while, but not as seasoned as Bligh. And then you have Byam coming on, his first voyage. So you get that kind of three different experiences too, through three different sets of eyes. And I think they do a pretty good job with that. On your point, if you just have Charles Laughton like reading his journal, like his journal entries here, maybe you get some of that that feedback that you're looking for, where he is explaining like what his reasoning is for being such a hard ass. But I think I do think it's interesting how you have the three different kind of time frames for these characters too, to kind of. One's, the boss, one's disgruntled a little bit, and the other one's kind of coming in fresh eyes. So just interesting overall.
No, that's a great way of looking at it because they're at three different stages of their career, right? So it's kind of like it'd be interesting if like everyone kind of is mirroring who they're going to be, but it doesn't go that route, because again, this is supposed to be based on a true story. Did you know anything about this story prior to watching this movie?
No, not really.
Yeah, me neither. And I guess there's some historical inaccuracies. I didn't stick around. I guess the biggest one is whether or not William Bligh was this type of oppressor, type of ruler leader, because I guess there's some pushback on that he wasn't, this to this level of a tyranny type of leader. You know what I mean? Which, man, that would suck if you're William Bligh in real life and you're looking back and you're like, why am I getting dragged through the mud? I didn't do any of this. You know what I mean? But Hollywood likes a good villain, and he fit the bill. So let's talk modern day recasting. So I got to be honest with you. I did not really think about who to recast here, only because I noticed that, Will, there was a couple remakes of this movie. And one of them was in 1984 with Anthony Quinn, who played Captain William Bligh, and Mel Gibson, who plays Fletcher Christian. And this movie also had a supporting cast of Daniel Day-Lewis, Liam Neeson, Laurence Olivier, and a bunch of others. So I just was curious. I wanted to kind of talk about the two of them, Quinn and Gibson, as your Bligh and Captain Fletcher or Christian.
Yeah.
That feels, without watching it, it feels like it works. Now, Gibson may be a little miscasted because I'm not sure if they're going to go the British route, what his accent sounds like. But as far as, Anthony Quinn as William Bligh, that feels like perfect casting to me. I don't know about you. Yeah,
no, that's pretty good casting. The one that's made in like the late 50s or early 60s has Marlon Brando in it.
Yeah, it had Brando in it.
That's another kind of interesting side note there. I think perfect casting on that second bit, because I do think that Mel Gibson has that, I'm thinking of The Patriot, where he's like, he's trying to, stand firm on his beliefs, but he finally gets broken from them. So I think that probably works out pretty well in that film.
Yeah, that's an underrated movie. I like that movie.
For sure.
Okay. Real quick thought too, when you said it, you look at those three. So if we're looking at Fletcher Christian, the character, right? And so often the guy that portrays him first usually gets to be the kind of the standard, as long as he does a good job, the standard is how you play Fletcher Christian, right? When I think about Gable, Brando, and Gibson, though, like, I definitely think there's a connection in a lot of similarities and parallels between Gable and Brando. You know what I mean? And Brando has a little Gibson in him too, but like when I think about Gable and Gibson, they don't feel that similar to me. So it's kind of like I feel like I'm interested in watching the 1984 version just because I'd like to see what Gibson does with it. Is that a fair assessment? Do you think Gable and Gibson are a little closer than maybe I'm giving them credit for?
Well, Gibson had his run of like romantic comedies that he did, like What Women Want, and I can't think of another one, I guess, but that's the first one that comes to mind. And you can see the charisma that he has is the same type of charisma that Gable has. So yeah, I think the hiccup really comes from our knowledge of Gibson is really more as an action star. So it's hard to see Gable in the like. Could Gable have been done Errol Flynn's character in Captain Bligh? I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know if he has that same type of like action star charisma that's needed for that role.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying there. When I think about Gable, I think about like his charm feels more resolved, more refined, more where Gibson's charm is more resolved is not how I would put. What is it?
Bearded.
Yes.
He's not
It's a little glitchy. It's a little glitchy, right? But it's like it's definitely on purpose, and there's a genius behind his bearded way of doing it, because he's taking you for a ride with his flirting, right? His charisma. It's a lot of fun when you see him doing it. So I like that word. That's a good word. Let's get to your modern day recast. Who'd you have?
I didn't really have a great one for Charles Laughton, but Clark Gable, for some reason, I couldn't get Austin Butler out of my head. Kind of towards the tail end of this movie. I think that he would have that ability to like kind of toe the line for a while and then finally get sick of it. So that was kind of who I was thinking for this role.
What performance of his would you like try to make compatible to this one, that where you would see that, like, what would you pull from, and maybe just bits and pieces of all of them, but like what specifically about Austin Butler, what movie or role that you've seen him do that you think is compatible to Fletcher Christian?
Well, I mean, if you're just thinking of pure charisma, you just look at Elvis, right? I mean, that's the first place. No, I think he doesn't have the, I guess for Clark Gable, he's got something that's a little more witty than we've seen Austin Butler. Austin Butler has always been very cool in his roles. Like he's always been a little bit more, I guess, reserved.
Reserved was the word I was looking for. Thank you. Reserved. Yeah. I said resolved earlier. Yeah.
But you're right. I think Austin Butler hasn't quite hit that that charming note as much as Clark Gable, as we've seen from Clark Gable. But you know, there's just something about Austin Butler that I feel like he could kind of chameleon his way into a role like this.
Oh, 100%, dude. I've seen enough different. I mean, the guy played Elvis, and then he played a cult follower. He was just in. Actually, that his performance in Eddington is very similar to his character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. They're very, very, very similar. So, just something to keep note. Let's get to some anecdotes. I kind of led a little bit with this, but Clark Gable and Charles Laughton will powerhouses. This is like De Niro and Pacino today. Imagine them not getting along in real life, and with the social media and the very territorial nature of the fans that come with their, their respected person that they like more than the other. Like, are you a Pacino guy or are you a Terry? Like today, you would have fans that would be debating those two forever, which they do, but like it's more in a fun way. Can you imagine if they hated each other in real life? In this case, Charles Laughton and Clark Gable had zero chemistry off screen. They couldn't be completely different if they tried. Now, again, I'm going to read this anecdote, and I did do more than just ChatGPT research this time. I went and I wanted to corroborate and follow up because I'm getting ready to make a claim here that I wanted to make sure that there was some substance behind. So just note that what I'm about to tell you is historical truth, okay? Clark Gable and Charles Laughton had zero chemistry off screen, and not in a good way. Gable was a laid-back, very American masculine star, okay, who thought Laughton, a classically trained British actor, was overly theatrical, and in turn found Gable's found Gable's acting shallow and uninspired. Their mutual disdain created real tension, which ironically helped fuel the film's core conflict between the two characters. However, reason is said that off screen that Gable did not like the flamboyant nature of Laughton because Laughton was an out at that time, either gay or bisexual man, and it has been determined throughout Hollywood that Gable, although never publicly stated anything, there's no like hardcore stories of him being homophobic. Those in his corners would have said that he did express themes of homophobia in his time. So again, it could be closet homophobia, whatever, but whether or not that claim is true, Charles Laughton was gay, and many people think that Gable was uncomfortable because of that's early days. Like apparently Laughton brought his boyfriend on the set, and it made Gable uncomfortable just seeing them be so free together. So
that's strange, honestly, because there's some scenes in the second act when Byam and Christian especially are on the island together that are borderline erotic, man. Like when they're watching the women swim and they're like kind of leaning on each other, and like I'm not judging. I was actually kind of proud of the movie for kind of not kind of going in that direction. But it's just weird to hear this because I would have thought that Gable was just fine with this type of
dude,
behavior.
100%. I didn't know how we were gonna get here, but I'm glad we got here. So both movies had these weird, like these weird images of like gay undertones that I was like, is this done on purpose? Is this going to lead somewhere? Both movies, and I'll give you an example of both. You're right. I laughed out loud in Mutiny on the Mutiny when the two native women they're like sitting on the sand posed almost. They're just relaxing. And then they jump cut to Byam and Christian, and they're kind of like doing the same thing, but they're like next to each other. First of all, I thought that was hilarious, but they were really close. And I'm like, wow, that was kind of shot on purpose. I don't know. But then in Captain Blood, the way that he's like fixing, Pitt's leg or knee early on, it's like draped over him. And he's kind of like, he's like on his inner thigh. I was like, what is going on with these movies? Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just thought it was funny that these undertones existed. So you picked up on those, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just
what's that say weird about you and me, Will? Because it never went anywhere on the movies. So
it probably says more than we need to talk about here. No, but to get back to the anecdote, like it's just shocking to hear that, I guess, because I would have just assumed, giving some of the stuff that it felt obvious to me that there was kind of like they were essentially saying Tahiti is paradise, is what that second act felt like. And 100%. That's where they should be. And then you get those kind of erotic undertones between Christian and Byam, and it just felt like natural to me that the movie was thinking this was part of that paradise. So it's just weird to hear that Gable was, homophobic, or at least.
Well, again,
potentially.
This is 100-year-old research, and I know we're not going to have it, but we could have some Gable maniacs out there who say that was not true. I'm sure that what feels more natural to me is that there would be a disdain between a British actor, an American actor, a Hollywood kind of A-list star versus like the serious actor, theater actor. You know, that feels more where the probably the confrontations exist.
Yeah.
More than but I did feel it was probably ample to speak about just this undertone or under whatever that existed because it was true and I had no idea that it was true. So, just thought it should be shared.
Yeah.
So much so, Will, that Irving Thalberg is a name that we've heard before. He was the producer on this movie, and he purposely casted these two to get that tension out of them. He thought it would work in scenes specifically because of each character, Bligh and Christian, in the way they had to kind of have tension with each other on screen. I think hats off to him. You know, both guys walked away from the movie. Nobody got into a fisticuffs. And I think it served the movie because, you know, it definitely feels like there's tension there. So hats off to Irving Thalberg for, you know, gaslighting and manipulating two grown men. But they were professionals, apparently, when they came to work. So instant classic and cultural moment. The Mutiny on the Bounty became a huge box office hit, Will, and a critical darling. It won Best Picture at 1936 Academy Awards and was nominated in all 5 major categories, a rare feat at the time, something we just talked about with It Happened One Night. Now, something to think about, and you've already kind of talked about this, but the three actors in this movie, Frank, Clark, and Charles, all nominated.
Yep.
It's kind of what happens if you get a third-party voting system here in this country. You know what I mean? A lot of people believe that they all stole votes from each other, and that's why John Ford's, I had his name, Victor McLaughlin?
Yep, that's it.
McLaughlin from The Informer won for Best Picture. So, again, I would argue that all 3 of these performances are better than what we saw from Victor, even though Victor, I thought, did a really good job. I just think these were better, but it makes sense that they would split votes and steal from that. So what do you think? Do you think Victor still deserved the award after what we just watched?
I probably not. If I had to vote for one of these 3, I'd probably vote for Charles Laughton, just because it's that perfect example of like he's doing such a good job that I actually hate him. Like,
yes. I
couldn't stand him, but it's because he's doing such a good job at it. And his consistency, he gets to be in all 3 acts pretty heavily. He's a little loose on the second act, but he's the bookend here. So I think his performance and his, you know, kind of, I don't know what the right word is, indecency as captain is the undertone of the whole movie. And without it, it kind of fails.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And what's interesting is I actually think of the 3, I know I talked a little bit about making a case for Frank Tone because I thought he did such a good job at the end.
Yeah.
Gable does disappear a little bit in the story because it seems like you're right. It feels like Charles Laughton is there kind of pretty consistent in all 3 acts where we kind of bounce back and forth between Byam and Gable's story a little bit.
Right.
But there was one scene in the movie where Laughton really showed his acting chops. What do you know what I'm talking about? Like, what was Laughton's best 15 seconds on screen? Do you know what I'm going with it?
Is it is it after the guy dies, the sergeant or the lieutenant dies? Is that what you're thinking?
So no, it was just simply the way he reacted to them finding the island after they've been stranded on that like safety boat, you know, or for what 50 some days or whatever, how many days they were out there. And when he like sees land, the way he portrayed it with his facials, I was blown away. I was like, it for a guy that's been, like you said, indecent the entire movie, but for some reason now he's on this ship and he's in charge of this ship here. He's the guy that you want him to be. He's sharing, he's taking care of the sick and the elder, you know what I mean? And he's the guy that he should have been that shouldn't have got him in the situation that they're in, which is something that I want to talk about here in a little bit when it comes to choices and consequences. But his reaction to seeing the island is next level to me. I just thought it was really brilliant. So
no, that's a great point. Yeah, that whole scene from when he gets put on the boat until the end of it, he stands out. Absolutely.
For sure. All right, Will, let's talk about the director if we can just for a minute. We didn't talk too much about Frank Lloyd. This is our first Frank Lloyd movie. But by 1935, Frank Lloyd was already a Hollywood veteran. We missed him on our route here. Born in Scotland in 1886, he began his career on stage before transitioning to silent films in the 1910s. However, he quickly became known for his efficient direction and epic storytelling, and he won his first Oscar for The Divine Lady in 1929. Now, so he's already an Oscar award winner by the time he makes this film. It helped found the Academy Award, and he also helped found the Academy of Motion Pictures and Sciences. When MGM needed a steady hand to direct this massive production of Mutiny on the Bounty, they turned to Lloyd. The film starred Clark Gable and Charles Laughton, two powerhouse actors, blah, blah, blah. Their off-screen tension mirrored each other in real life. However, Lloyd, the ever-diplomat, kept the production afloat by carefully scheduling scenes to avoid flare-ups, joking that the real mutiny lived in the call sheet. So I thought that was kind of a clever little thing to talk about. But Frank Lloyd, anything from the director that you specifically seen him have his fingerprints on, or do we just not know enough yet, and maybe when we watch a second film we'll be able to see more of his tendencies?
Yeah. No, I thought it was well directed. Sometimes a director, if it doesn't stand out, it can be a good thing. And he kind of understands the strengths of the film and kind of lets them play out. I do think that he treated Tahiti very well. There's a different movie where this is, it's just racist, right? And it didn't feel like that. It felt like they actually cared about the natives of Tahiti. And, that's important for something that's being made in 1935. So I think that is something that he probably has his fingerprints on.
That's a great take there. I want to ask, because I didn't really think about race, and that's kind of the point, right, that you're making. Don't you think, how do I want to ask this when it comes to a director that maybe would go down the racial road, right? You think that's just not realistic? You think they take liberties in the movies? Like what when you say that a director maybe would have made a different choice, are you thinking more of like just making the natives like a caricature of human beings and not real like people that you should have empathy for? Like what exactly are you alluding to when you speak of that?
Well, he has real reverence for the leader, right? I can't remember his stinking name.
Is it Hottie or something like that?
Yeah. So he has real, like when he gets on the boat, he has a real he cares about Hottie, and you can tell that obviously he's there for something, but it's not like forceful. It's not like you're going to give us these fruit trees. It's, hey, we're here for these fruit trees, and here's what we're going to trade for in order to get those. And there's another movie where Bligh comes back, and instead of Christian running, Bligh terrorizes the beach, right? And ends up killing a bunch of the Tahitians. So
he just takes what he wants. Yes,
exactly. But Bligh has a sense of care for these the people that live there. So if it was a different movie, maybe Bligh doesn't have that sense of that caring, which is interesting because Bligh doesn't really seem to care about his crew. So there's some weird tension there. I'm not sure what it is.
So I hear that point, and it made me think about it maybe for the first time, because care, you're right, is interesting. And maybe when we get to the plot here in the next 5 minutes, we start talking about this movie in detail. I think the best way to talk about this movie is really a character breakdown of all three guys and just kind of like where they were going and trying to navigate. let me ask this question to you. Let me push back on your point. Not push back, but let me give you an alternative and see if maybe this is more possible of what he was thinking. It seems to me that the only time Bligh shows any real level of outside of when they get on the lifeboat, right? When he's in a place of authority, because he definitely does kiss the ass of the hottie or whatever we're gonna call our gentleman there, the leader of of Tahiti there. I feel like he himself, in some weird way, is still like a man of the handbook, so to speak. Not necessarily like the things he has to do, but not necessarily handbook, but like he is loyal to a king. And anytime the king can be thrown in his face, whether it be the crown, who owns the ship, like what he's allowed to get away with, he does. That's the only time he really backs off. So I feel like if he goes to Tahiti and like puts his fingerprints on Tahiti in that fashion, where he just takes what he wants, pillages everybody, and then off he goes, like I feel like he would have to answer to the king.
Sure.
And maybe that's not something his character wants to do. He wants to avoid the king at all times, and that's kind of the way I took it. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong.
No, I think you're onto something there. It's just a strange. It's almost like authority.
Because otherwise, why would he? Like, what is his game for caring about this prince at all?
Well, it could just be authority in general, because at some point, I can't remember, there was a separate captain that Bligh was under that he mentions. He mentions that there was another captain that he came to Tahiti before with. So at that time, Bligh wouldn't have had the same type of authority. So it's almost like a reverence for authority. So when he recalls that captain and he recalls the captain's relationship with Hadi Hadi, it's almost like he's giving space for that chief that captain, because he has a reverence for the relationship he had with his own captain. Sure. So it's almost like Bligh has like a he believes in his authority to a certain point, and then there's something else on the other side of it. Whether it's the king, I'm not sure, because it sometimes feels like he's servicing himself along the way here. So, it's maybe the movie's just a little bit confused.
Okay.
And maybe this is one of the small flaws of the film, is that it doesn't really pin down what Bligh is doing here.
Well, let's pin it down. Let's talk about it. So this movie, I feel like the way it starts off is we get a lot of Gable he's on mainland in England, and he is taking he's looking for 6 specific people, or 6 press gang there, and these guys don't really have a choice in the matter, so it's basically their version of the draft. I thought this movie did a really good job with its like sub characters too, like Ellison. I really enjoyed Ellison's character. You feel for a guy like that just had a baby, that just just got married, and right away they do a good job of showing you the difference in leadership between Bligh and how he interacts with Ellison versus how Gable interacts with him. And we kind of get to latch on to Gable early on and say, oh, this is our hero that we're going to kind of go throughout the movie with. So with all that being said, you've got our setup, which I thought was really good, because we get to the bounty relatively quick for the movie. We didn't spend too long and kind of like trying to figure out how to get there. I thought we got there pretty quickly. So as far as Act 1 goes, I thought the setup of all the characters, even Byam, he's like excited to go, even though it's his mother doesn't want him to go. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just thought the way Act 1 really is, it just felt like, we were on our way. Like Act 1, the setup of all these characters being what they are. And they do a lot with the, what do they call it? The lashes. What were they calling that?
Oh, gee, the
started with an F.
Oh, flogging.
Flogging. Yeah. The flogging, that kind of is his go-to. But I just thought the setup in Act 1 was really well done. where we start getting to these areas is at some point you're hoping that Bligh, who I do find fascinating just because Laughton's doing it, you're kind of glued to everything he's doing.
Right.
Is there character change? There's not growth, but like, is there anything? What is he? Is he all evil, Will? Is he not? Is he calculated? I think his character is the most fascinating because either the movie didn't do a good enough job with Laughton in saying, hey, when you get on the lifeboat, you shouldn't be this way. You should still be, this kind of merciless character, even like he should eat the bird, even though the other guys caught it, but they don't. Like, he takes it to the sick. So that's a choice. What is it the movie is trying to tell us about this character? Like, your best guess.
Yeah. That he's inconsistent, right? I honestly, I don't know. I feel like there's, he really, when people are deferential to him, that are under him, and give him the authority without question, then he seems to make the right decision for them. But if there's any sort of insubordinates, if there's any sort of pushback, that's when he gets, he puffs his chest out, and it's his way or the highway. So it's almost like it's saying that he's okay with being a good leader as long as the people are actually, on their hands and knees for him, right? And they're bowing to him because he's an extension of the crown. So I think they're saying that my best guess is that he is the type of leader that is okay as long as everyone's falling in line. But if they're not, if there's anything that doesn't break the right way, then he's going to be who he is and take the cheese, right? So
take the cheese. We agree that it's on purpose that he's trying to save the sick on the lifeboat, right? That's on purpose. Like, the director, they're making a decision there, correct? I actually think it's better for the movie that they made that decision. I'm stuck though, like I think you are, with what the intention of what we're supposed to take away from his character is. And I think there's truth in everything you just said. It feels like a guy who's loyal to the crown, but has been in a position of authority for so long, and he doesn't have a lot of pushback because he's out there on the seas, right? It just feels like a guy who's been, power hungry because of that. Over time, he became that. But like, he's still, it does feel like there could be a good person inside of him, and only Laughton could pull all those emotions like out of that character, because I think, like you spoke about with the director, could have made a decision could have made this movie go completely wrong when they got to Tahiti because of the decisions that he could have made with the native people. In this case here, he could have just been a villain. He could have just been an awful leader that we'd be rooting for them to overthrow. And I think we were, because I didn't like him either. Like, Laughton made you really not like his character. But there were little pockets and little moments where you're like, okay, this guy could be okay, right? And I think the movie's better because they did make those decisions, even though it feels like it's an inconsistency that you could argue does hurt the movie's overall scoring. Fair?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And I think when we get to that third act too, where he's like unwilling to recognize that he's dead set and everyone was mutinous and that's it. And it's almost like he just wants everyone to pay for the decision, but it just seems so weird and inconsistent with who he is on that life raft, right? In the lifeboat. So I don't know. Maybe there's something I'm missing too. I'm willing to admit that here.
I want to give you a fix it in one move right now. Okay. This is where I would go with it, because the only thing about this movie that stopped me from going 5 was the ending. I'm not a big fan of when the director or when the storytellers or whatever kind of like has their cake and eats it too. Okay. Yeah. They made a choice. Byam was found guilty.
Yep.
And then they pardoned him. I don't like that, right? This is where you can fix this in one move. If you want to give, because he was so just reluctant to back off his own stubbornness, that being Bligh, right?
Yeah.
They hang Byam's character, who we don't want to be hung at all, right?
Right.
But they hang him. And then finally you get to kind of see someone's death have an impact on Bligh somewhere. Like if they can fix, you know what I mean? In like his reaction to that, or maybe, oh shit, maybe I was wrong, whatever. Like if you can play with that, I think it makes for a better, you know, message on authority and how our choices have consequences. Here, I kind of felt like they kind of went with the Hollywood ending a little bit at the end of the movie, and I didn't really like that. What do you think about Act 3?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that too. And it gets a little, patriotic too for me, like at the end with the getting back on the ship and the Crown's Navy and all that. It got a little too patriotic for me. But I think you're on the right track here. I think there's some key decisions that don't quite go the right way that kind of keep it from being like an all-time great. But yeah.
What'd you think about the ending, though? You know, the old saying, burn the boats or drown the boats or whatever it is. You know, there's that parable of a guy that says we're going to war and we're not coming back. So burn the boats or whatever it is. I thought that was kind of a cool, clever ending when they got to the island and he's like, this is it. We're not looking back. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, in Jimmy John's, you know how they have all those different like signs and stuff?
Yeah.
There's the one story in there about the guy who like lives on the beach and fishes, and the guy keeps coming back to him and is like, I finally have enough money to, do X, Y, and Z. And the guy's been fishing and living on the beach the whole time. Like there's something to be said about that too, about the paradise of like just living without the consequences of civilization, without the authority of the crown being held over you while you're making do. So there's a bit of a like it's dreamy at the end too. It's like they finally got to a place where they can be free of all those things.
Yeah, 100%. It's so interesting. I remember actually having a conversation with Molly, your wife, early on. We were at the bowling alley and we were talking about, she had mentioned to me, she's like, yeah, but if you live in Hawaii, because I was like saying places I would love to like live, because I was like, Hawaii, why would I've never been there, but I would just, it feels dreamy, it feels like if it's affordable and you can do it, like why would I not want to live there? And she's like, yeah, but if it's paradise every day, then is it really paradise anymore? Because then it like changes the definition of paradise, right? And I was like, yeah, but if I'm in Adrian every day, I'd rather be in Hawaii versus Adrian, every single day. So like that was the conversation her and I were having. But it does kind of like beg the question here too, because the prince or the chief, he kind of makes mention of like, what is money? Had no idea, right? And it is a fascinating case study of, we are drilled to feel like our purpose in life is to 9 to 5, provide, and this is that. Now, what would happen if we were just born on an island that doesn't have any structure and your main goal is just all of your, fight or flight, got to eat those types of innate structures that you need to kind of for survival. What would that do to human beings' psychology and just how we are? Would we be happier? Would we live longer? Would we not? Like, I don't know. You tell me, Will, are we meant and is it inevitable for our way of life?
The problem is our brains haven't evolved to beyond that. So what we were 10,000 years ago is exactly what we were or are today, except because we're generational learners instead of like genetic learners. Like we evolve from generation to generation because we take all the knowledge and add it and then put stuff on top of it. So like, but our brain hasn't evolved enough to be able to really handle all of that, right? Like think about 10,000 years ago, if you lived in a tribe of people of 100 or 1,000, that was big. Now you have 5,000 people that you follow and check in on every day on Instagram or whatever it is that you're on. We're not built to handle that. So I think the chief has it right.
You know, I agree. I'd like to try his experiment. I know that. I just thought it was fascinating to ask the question because you're right. It does feel like all of our progress in human history is from the groupthink, the collective whole, but individually, we're still not, at speed. Our modems are not designed. Our bandwidth is not capable of all the things we're creating, of being able to fully process and understand and emotionally be intelligent about the things in which we're doing. And make no mistake about it, we are emotional creatures. So, interesting take there. One more thing I want to do before we get to Captain Blood. I know we're a little long here in the tooth, so we'll go a little quicker in the second movie. But, Will, I want to ask this because, and we can even kind of use it as a transition into the second movie, because the big theme to me, and it's something that there's a lot of parallels to real life, man, happening in these stories that's happening in real life, at least in, 2025 politics and geopolitics across the globe, right? It's this idea of choices and consequences, okay? Sometimes in these movies, it feels like a choice is made so confidently, right? And then all of a sudden, they find themselves, oh shit, I made the wrong choice. And now all of the moral or all of the equity that they had for their righteousness or the thing they believed in on a dime goes out the window. And now they become these different things because their circumstances have changed. And now they're pleading for their life. So there's almost something respectful about Bligh's character. I say that, but was he pleading his case before he was thrown off the boat? Or was he still being a tyrant? He was still being a tyrant because he told him, I'll give you one more chance to make the right decision here. So there's almost something respectful about guys like that are in the movie, not in real life, but in the movie, you know what I mean? Because it's better for their character. But where are you at with choices and consequences when... Let me just tell you where my mind's going with this, okay? I won't be very specific, but I'll be specific enough so you know. The common theme that I'm struggling with right now as somebody that's watching, let's just call it the Republican Party feed on itself right now, okay? Is that it feels like what you've always said is that they are for something until it shows up to their front porch, and now they're not for that thing anymore.
Yeah.
And then when you hear them start speaking out against someone, we should be like, hey, welcome to our side on this topic. Thank you for joining us. But we don't. We get mad about it because we're like, this is the thing we've been touting about this whole time. How could you not have seen it? Or what we believe is that you chose not to see it, even though it was in front of your eyes the whole time. I feel like there's a lot of that happening in these movies. And all of a sudden they get on the wrong side of circumstance and they change, where I almost feel like the Blighs of the world are almost more respectable because they don't change. What do you think? Sure. Is there a thought here at all that is coherent that you can grab onto from the movies, or am I just I don't have this process or thought out enough to ask the question?
Well, the problem is I'm having a hard time seeing an example when I'm thinking of the movies. Of what you're talking about. So I guess maybe if you had a specific example to kind of draw from for the analogy, that would be helpful.
I did when I was watching them. I should have wrote them down. So as one of your hosts here, I didn't do a service here. I guess I'm thinking about it's definitely within the Mutiny on the Bounty and the three characters. So maybe it's something that we will scrap for now, and we'll talk about another time when I can use it as an example. I'm sure we'll have many other movies that had the same thing.
Sure. Well, no, I can thinking of Captain Blood. I think there's, Errol Flynn was his full name, Dr. Blood, Peter Blood. There we go.
Peter Blood.
Okay. All right. So in the beginning, he definitely thinks that he can just do whatever he wants. And when he realizes that he makes a wrong decision, his whole life is upended, right? Yeah. So I think there is some of that. But here's the thing about our political landscape and why I think your example is a little tenuous. Republicans don't care if they're wrong anymore. They can just say whatever they want because there are no consequences for them. Like, they can say and do whatever they want because, and I say that not because there aren't people that are outraged by what they do or what they say, but they literally just don't care if they say something bad or if they say something wrong. They just brush it off because truth doesn't matter for them anymore. The comparison between Republicans and Democrats is when Democrats make a mistake. I shouldn't say that because not all of them do. But when people who are more liberal than Republicans are make a mistake, they're willing to admit it most often. They're willing to say, I was wrong about this, and here's what we should do now. Whereas Republicans, it's like it never happened. It's like a truth that it just poofs out of existence if it doesn't fit their direction anymore. So they're. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I agree with that. I have no holes in that at all. The thing where I wish I had a better example for the movie because I definitely there was something that happened that triggered all of this thought in my head where I was like, wow, that's very compatible to today. But the thing that I'm finding a little curious or a little interesting is that because I agree with you on 99% of what you just said. What I'm a little shocked by is that somehow, if that was the truth fully, then there wouldn't be any division at all right now. And there really is some semblance of division, even though we think it's crazy and cuckoo that they are taking stands now. But it's like, like Candace Owens is now hugely against Trump. There's just these pockets of people right now that are like pushing back against him. It's like, wow, I'm kind of confused that you guys would take a stand on anything at all. You know what I mean? Because it felt like on everything they were so just yes, sir, no, sir, like compliant to the things. It's like of all these things you're taking a stand now. It's like I find that to be a little because it's definitely not politically in their favor. So it's a little interesting, for lack of a better word. But there was something that happened with. I feel like with Bligh in the movie that would bring it back full circle because I guess my point is that when you so righteously believe in something, and I'm not sure that any of our characters were pushing something on a righteous path. It was just a reaction to the way they also Gable reacts to Bligh. He's not really righteous in his motivations. You know what I mean? He's just more, hey, you shouldn't treat other human beings that way. So I guess maybe for lack of, setup here, maybe we should abandon it. But that's just kind of where I was at. I'll do a better job next time of pulling those examples out when I ask these bigger questions. But you're so good at finding what I'm talking about, the method to the madness that is me rambling. So, but yeah, I think you're right. I'm a little taken back now by like, whoa, wait a minute. Why are you taking a stance on this now? Like, aren't you supposed to be all aligned? And it definitely doesn't seem to be. It's just, I find it a little curious. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, it's fair. Isn't it all, I don't want to get too far afield, but isn't it all like Epstein stuff? Isn't that what it is? Yeah,
it is. It is mainly Epstein stuff for the most part. But like, there's been some cracks in the wall and some other things. But like, I guess my whole thing is like, I think where we, instead of like saying, hey, you're my ally on this topic now, let's go forward, we just create the divide even more by saying, no, you should have seen it the whole time. And you know what I mean? And I feel like I'm trying to pull myself back now and say, I don't want to repeat this same cycle anymore because it's definitely not doing anybody any good, even though internally I'm like, We've been telling you this, you know what I mean? But it is what it is. Let's get back to the movies. Let's talk Captain Blood, Will, if we can. So you were a big fan of this movie, and I liked it too, but I feel like I'm going to land on a 3.5, mainly because it did feel a little one man. I'm not really sure if he was ever really hit with any real big resistance. But as far as like watching a guy that's super cool, kick ass, and make the right decision almost every time, I think Errol Flynn really came out of nowhere. So let's talk about it. Captain Blood, release date December 28th, 1935. Tagline reads, after treating a Monmouth? I'm not saying that right. After treating a rebel against King James in 1680s England, a young Irish doctor is exiled as a slave to Jamaica, where he captures a Spanish, galleon, and becomes the most feared pirate of the Caribbean. Directed by Michael Curtiz. Well, we haven't seen this guy since 1928, 7 years ago when we watched Noah's Ark. Distributed by Warner Brothers. Runtime of 1 hour, 58 minutes, starring Errol Flynn as Captain Blood and Olivia de Havilland as Arabella Bishop. Letterboxd rating 3.7. Rotten Tomatoes score. Rotten Tomatoes scores this 100% by the critics and 90% by the audience. So I think overall, more people lean that this is a better watch, or a more fun movie, or whatever it is. They just grade this a little bit better than our predecessor we were talking about. So with all that being said, Will, tell me maybe a little more specifically why this movie was a little bit closer to the Mutiny on the Bounty as maybe it was for me.
Yeah, well, I think it's a more fuller package in the end because I think technically what they're pulling off in some of these battle scenes is, insane for 1935. I also think that there's a little bit more depth to Errol Flynn's kind of, or Peter Blood, I should say the character's name, to Blood's kind of like decision making here. And there's a little bit more political depth than I think you might be giving it some credit for, because I mean, there is the whole middle scene when they're first becoming pirates. I mean, they're essentially laying out socialist terms for their, their doctrines, right? For how they're going to treat each other on the ship. So, so much
so that when, was it Nutella or Nutty or whatever shoots his toe off to try to get more money? Because I had that thought when they were doing it, and then he did it, and I'm like, oh, how are they going to do this? So that was really clever.
Yeah. So, I think there's a lot going on in the film. It's not as much as what Mutiny on the Bounty is trying to do. And, but, if you just watch this without any of the other, like big picture stuff, and you just are watching an action film, it really works. But if you're also looking for some more depth, if you're looking for, there's some good chemistry between Flynn and Havilland. And so it works as a love story too. I just thought it was a complete movie. It just felt complete. It felt well thought out, and it felt final in the end.
I think that's fair to say. It definitely feels like a total package of a movie. The only thing I wanted, and again, I just wanted like one of his decisions to be the wrong one. Like maybe at the end of Act 2, maybe he gets captured by it feels like we got to the French collaboration and then the separation of them real quick. You know what I mean? Where that could have been an interesting path, because he foreshadows that he's like, I might have just made the worst decision, of my life type thing. And then right away he's fixed that decision. I would have liked to see maybe a little bit more resistance against his decision making. Because I'm not necessarily arguing that there's no depth to it. I just felt like a guy that analyzes everything and makes the right one the whole time.
Well, that's not necessarily true.
Okay.
Because he's ready to drive into Port Royal without consent. He's 100%. Ready to just go in and end it all. He's ready. But the crew talks him back. Okay. The crew actually talks him back. He listens to reason. And I thought of M in this scene, because we get that court, we get the kangaroo court where they're kind of going through Fritz Lang's character and like trying to figure out what to do with him, right?
Yep.
And how when we watched them, we talked a lot about like the individual wants revenge, but the group has to be better than that. And I thought this was a really good example of that, where Flynn is ready to just drive right in and consequences be damned. And the crew talks him back, and he listens to that, the bigger picture here, and lets them drive that decision. So he was ready to make a bad decision.
Yes, but the decision is ultimately made to still go that route.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because of the very convenient nature that there's a new George or king. There's pardons, and the king who's never met them, and that he believes all of them to be innocent creatures. So, like, I did not like that. It felt too perfect happenstance. You know what I mean? So it's like, I would have liked to seen them go into Port Royal under the original regime and make mistakes, and then him have to figure out, hey guys, I made a mistake. I was making the mistake because I finally became emotional with my decision making rather than resolved and calculated and all these things. I wanted to see that route. You know what I'm saying? I agree with you. They definitely talk him down, which shows growth in a leader to make the right decision. But ultimately, for the movie's purpose, they're like, we're going forward anyways, but now you can feel good about it because you've been pardoned and you're going to like this king. So that's kind of where my pushback was a little bit. But ultimately, it wasn't enough for me to not like the film. In the final, I don't want to call it a cop-out. This just is more my, I don't have no issues. But like, when you can fill 25 minutes of a movie with just great action, you don't have to make a lot of decisions. You make one decision, you just have to kind of show how you're going to get there. And I was blown away, just like I was technically in the first one. I was blown away by how they're performing. And I'm like, that when we got to Act 3, that's when I was like, oh, we are finally in a Michael Curtiz film. Are we not? Like, it felt really similar to Noah's Ark at the end of that movie. So much so that the only thing that stands out to me is we saw all these technical marvels of like great filmmaking. Do you remember the first scene of this movie though, and how bad it looked when they're riding horses?
Yeah, it was like up against the like running movie screen or something. Yeah, it was terrible.
Why save money there and everywhere else? Like, you know what I mean? I was like, oh boy, we're in for a long 2 hours if the whole movie's going to look like this. You know what I mean? And it quickly evacuates that and goes away from it. But I just was curious if you picked up on that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right, we move on. Give me modern day recasting, Will. Anybody that you have on the docket to play Captain Blood?
Oh man, it's really hard not to think of Orlando Bloom here. But he's getting a little old, so I don't know. Miles Teller's got that charisma that, you know.
Give me a blonde, Will.
Yeah,
give me a blonde.
Blonde guy? Do you know any?
I don't know.
Miles Teller, just put some hair dye in there, man. You'd be all right.
When I think of like famous long blonde hair actors, like Heath Ledger comes to mind, right? Just who else? Who else is like a long? Where's our blondes gone, man?
I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe blonde's just not real, and it's always been fake. No, but yeah, I had Miles Teller there, and then for Olivia de Havilland, it's the only other one I had kind of in mind. Of course, I thought of Keira Knightley at first, and then just trying to think of someone a little bit younger today. Are you familiar with Isabel Merced? She is in the new Superman movie. She's been in The Last of Us in the season 2. She was Dora in the live action remake a few years ago. But she's got that kind of like, she's younger. She's also very clever. The way like the characters that she play are very clever, and I felt like Olivia, she'd be a good match here for that.
I really enjoyed the Olivia de Havilland. She was very, very nice. She did a good job acting. Very pretty. So
Yeah.
she did a very good job. I thought you were going to go with Tom Cruise's old lady there, Ana de Armas there.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That's kind of the route I went, just because she was in top of mind. I couldn't believe she was hanging out with Tom Cruise. I struggled here with the male because I was thinking blonde hair. I wanted to kind of go that route. I know you can dye it always, but like that's why I wanted to ask you who are our actors now that kind of walk around with that type of look. Because to me, the guy doppelganger, and I used this earlier in another, but like he feels like a young Calvin Klein to me. He looks like him a little bit.
Okay.
I just I wasn't quite sure who to put in this role. I did want to ask you this question. Was there any part of you, do you think mainly it was the times, the runtime of these two movies? Was there any part of you that was like a little dreading to watch these movies?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely when we put
drafted
two movies,
them. We drafted them.
No. The dread isn't that. The dread is like we're adults who are doing this for fun, and it's not that it wasn't fun to watch the movies. It's just hard to find. That's
4.5 hours.
All the other stuff that we have around it. So it was a day today, right? and last night getting prepared for it. So that's the issue, is that we're not rich and can't just do this for fun, or our jobs.
Yeah. This is probably a perfect time for me to say, Will, thank you for continuing to do this with me, buddy. It's been a lot of fun for me, but you're right. Yeah. I think I was dreading it runtime in kind of like these time period pieces that are very like specific to one thing, which is funny though, because like I didn't really look at these two as like pirate movies at first. I didn't realize, and that's one of my favorite franchises of all time. And yes, it's got a lot to do with Johnny Depp and, Jack Sparrow and the way he portrays that character. But like, it's so much more after you watch the franchise. Like the way they do all the characters are great. But I will say I was dreading today, and I found it to be pleasantly surprising by how fast I thought the movies did go, because they were good movies. So let's get director info, Will. Michael Curtiz was born Mano Curtiz Kamener in Hungary in 1886 and directed over 170 films across Europe and Hollywood. He came to Warner Brothers in the 1920s and quickly became their go-to director for prestige pictures, action, and drama. Known for his unrelenting pace, visual flair, and no-nonsense discipline, Curtiz had a hand in shaping the golden age of Hollywood, often behind the curtain, but always in control. A lot of times, Will, it's been said that he had such a Hungarian accent that a lot of times people didn't really know what he was saying. One of the actors recalled Curtiz asking for fog over the dog when he meant fog over the dock, and they spent 20 minutes trying to figure out what the hell he was talking about. So maybe he could have been a little more efficient with this, a translator on set. I don't know. But it is important to note, Will, that Curtiz directed Captain Bligh, launching Errol Flynn's career, and just a few years later helmed the legendary Casablanca, which is coming up in 1942, where he won Best Picture and Best Director. So his best days are still ahead of him. Where are you at with Michael Curtiz after two films?
For sure. Well, I'm having a little technical difficulties over here, so hopefully I'm not stalling out on you or anything, but
I can hear you. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. It's just a little choppy. Just wanted to make sure we were good. So I really think that he's got a lot of talent, as far as like right now. Reminds me a little bit of Michael Bay, right?
Dude, I was going there. Good. Go with it.
So it's like Michael Bay is an awesome director of like scene, right? He's great at setting up scenes. He's great at scope, so that the viewer understands what's going on at all times. Whether or not the plot's always going to fit together is another question when you're watching a Michael Bay movie. And it kind of feels like here with Michael Curtiz, there's Noah's Ark and then this that we've watched now. And this one's much better than Noah's Ark. I like it a lot more, but it's still got the pieces around the edges that don't quite all fit together. So.
Yeah, I would echo that. I agree. And the thing is it kind of feels like sometimes remember when we watched Hell's Angels and it felt like the whole movie was set up just for the action scenes at the end? This movie did not feel that way, but I do feel like we get little hits in the movie where it should have been flushed out a little better, or maybe the plot could, make the payoff at the end that much better if you have a little bit better story to go with it or whatnot. But when it comes to technical marvel of shooting a big action scene, both these movies were great, but how they pull off some of those fight scenes at the end, behind the scenes I would love to hear Michael Curtiz and just going through it. And I would wonder if any extras died on this set. Must be he fixed that quickly, because I can't imagine he'd be around too long. So let's get to anecdotes and then we'll get to the movie. Errol Flynn was an unknown nobody. When casted, Errol Flynn was virtually unknown, a little-known Australian actor and only one Hollywood role to his name, The Case of the Curious Bride. Warner Brothers had originally wanted Robert Donat, who declined due to health concerns. Flynn's casting was a huge gamble, but his charisma and athleticism made him an overnight sensation. Dude, you could not have told me that this is only this guy's second film ever, because he felt like a guy that's been doing these types of movies forever. He could have been like a Bond. He could have been a Pierce Brosnan. He could have, you know what I mean? Like, there's something very just aesthetically nice besides just the way you see him, because he's a beautiful man. But like the way he delivers, everything just feels so effortless. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yep. He was awesome here.
He definitely was. Olivia de Havilland was casted on a whim. Olivia de Havilland had been performing in A Midsummer Night's Dream on stage when Warner Brothers noticed her. She was just 19 years old and had no major film credits. Her natural chemistry with Flynn led to one of the greatest classic Hollywood screen pairings. They made 8 films together. So this kind of goes along with Rogers and Astaire. So usually when something's working, just keep riding it out. So I think let's talk about this last one. A massive set with real ships. To make the sea battles feel real, Curtiz insisted on using full-scale ships. The production reused some of the elaborate sea sets and ships built for the earlier silent epics. Practical effects, fog machines, and rear projection created remarkably convincing naval battles for the time. They're really doing this stuff. That's why it looks so great. It's just the thing that gets lost in all this is we're not even a decade into sound yet. You know what I mean? And we're getting great sound. A lot of it's probably, as it is today, is created in a sound room, sound stage afterwards. But like, it's blended so well that you can't even tell. And I do wonder, when you're doing big scenes like that, how you even go about trying to capture, what does the sound of a cannonball sound like? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like you got to get close enough to kind of figure that out. So
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But where are you at with the plot here? Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, the setup, story structure. I've kind of given you mine a little bit. I just felt like everything was a little too smooth sailing for him, which is why I docked it down, and the movie went from being taken serious to more of just a fun watch for me. But when we look at like the themes of the movie, there is some things here that can be broken down. So
yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely some like there's some pushback. You get a lot more of it here than you do in A Mutiny of Bounty, that to be patriotic doesn't always mean to be loyal to a king, right? It can sometimes mean that the king is not doing the right things, and you're allowed to, push back on that, and you're allowed to try to make him make better decisions. So you get a little bit more depth kind of on that pushback and, revolution. I mean, we don't get to see much of it because we get that 3-year period that they're doing the piracy, and we don't really see England again at that point. So it would help if maybe we saw a little bit of it on screen. And then you were saying earlier that you didn't like how convenient that last kind of setup was, and I definitely flagged that as well. So I wanted to make sure that I said, like, I agree with you that there's some convenience there. But overall, I thought, from front to back, it all went very smoothly. So there was no like glaring issues that we see in some of the movies. Like, why did they do that? It was more like this was pretty good. So,
Well, what I like that both movies did was they did involve humor. Maybe this one a little bit more than the first, but like I forget the character's name in the first movie, but it's like the handmaid to Bligh.
okay.
The gentleman that has to test the wind.
No, yeah,
Dude, he's got some great movie moments in that movie. So
yeah.
the first moment that's really funny is after he tells him to test the wind, you need to throw it with the wind. So he goes out there, he feels the wind, and he throws whatever he's throwing overboard, he's throwing the slop with the wind finally, because the first time he threw it into the wind and it came back into his face, right? But whenever there's no wind, he just takes it back downstairs and it piles up. So he doesn't know what to do with it. That's hilarious. And then also in the middle of the movie, when they get to Tahiti, he finds a native woman who wants to spend some time with him and he kind of like looks at her, and as she's trying to drag him into the room, and he points in there and she's like, yes. And he goes sprinting the other direction. And finally, by the end of it, he's got a whole family.
Yeah. Well, at first he saw some of those kids in there and he's like, nope, that's not for me. And he books it. But then,
that guy was great.
Yeah.
But they also, in Captain Blood, they have this nutty, I can't remember his character's name. I should look it up while I have it. Yes, that gentleman. Thank you. He had some really good moments in this movie too, where we've already kind of talked about, where he's trying to shoot. He's not honest at all, right? And he's trying to take advantage of his name. So I thought the way they did humor was really good. And there's some funny quotes in both movies, but Captain Blood had some one-liners that really stuck with me. So, I think as far as the director, we've spoken about the acting, we've spoken about technically how great both of these looked. Let's just kind of talk themes of leadership. And again, we're all human beings here, but like there's a lot of models. There's the dictatorship, there's the king, the monarchy, there's the diplomatic way of doing things. And it's funny that we kind of talked a little bit about Captain Blood and how they came up with the articles. And he does put it to a vote at the end, but it is interesting to state, and maybe they just did this for like efficiency purposes of storytelling, but like the guy that comes up with all the articles is Captain Blood. You know what I mean? So like that's interesting to note too. But what does that say about, just kind of break down the leadership? Because there's a lot of different models in these two movies that, you know, between the four major characters, Byam, Christian, Bligh, and Captain Blood.
Yeah, I mean, well, Captain Blood is much more interested in kind of everyone being together, right? He never once in the film is thinking about breaking out just for himself. From the very start, it's how am I getting everybody out of here? So I thought that was really interesting. I feel like, you know, I would be curious to see, is it Bynum? I'm blanking on his name.
Byam.
Yeah. I'd be curious to see him in the next stage, right? Because he's still so kind of fresh, and he gets, his sentence is commuted. So seeing what comes next for him is more interesting, I think, than where he is right now. But then, like Christian, I think we talked about Bligh enough. Christian's leadership is the one that's most interesting to me, because it seems like it's a little more nuanced. Like he's willing to admit that there needs to be a authority and structure and a hierarchy, but he also thinks that it needs to be defined by just actions and doing the right thing. So that's always been interesting to me, because that's theoretically how most of our justice systems are set up, right? Is hierarchical. Yeah, anyway.
Well, but let me stop you right there, because that's kind of where I wanted to go with it. Is let's take those two characters in. Let's take Blood and let's take Christian. Okay, just their leadership styles, or especially Fletcher or early on. I think this idea of hierarchy, on top surface could sound negative. There could be a negative connotation to it. Like, why would any person be? But I think for structure and getting things done, it's important to have rules, right? Because not everybody can be, the leader. You got to have followers and vice versa. It's important to know when to follow, and then it's important to know when to lead, and then there's hierarchy within every department of departments, right? So like everybody kind of has a role. I think it's important. However, I would be curious if done so to, like with Captain Blood, if you have kind of this utopian way of trying to solve things, even though they all do choose him, which is why Lost is so fascinating. I'm rewatching Lost for the second time. And Jack struggles early on with being the leader. He doesn't want to be the leader, right. But then he falls into that role and he starts making some decisions that doesn't consult everybody. So I guess those two leadership styles, there's some similarities, but they couldn't be very different. They're very different too. Is it just inevitable that we should put things in hierarchies, or should we be trying to figure out how all of us can make decisions together?
Well, oh man, I don't know. I think that it's pretty clear that historically speaking, hierarchies have been the natural kind of tendency. One of the things that this movie kind of fails a little bit for me is like the social structure on the pirate ship in Captain Blood presupposes one thing that I think is taking for granted, and it's that every single pirate on that ship is going to do the right thing. Right. And I think that by kind of ignoring that kind of does a disservice to the movie and that kind of structure. I'd like to think that we could do things more organically where we're all kind of making decisions together, but it really, I don't know how plausible it is when our structure is as big as like 375 million or whatever it is that kind of lives in the United States. So it's a complicated question. I think idealistically, I prefer, Captain Blood's leadership structure. But practically, I'm not sure how well it works.
And thus is the conundrum. I mean, it's ourselves fighting ourselves because we want it to be one way, but you need the participation from everybody to make perfect decisions at all time. Like now is the moment I need to let go. Now is the moment they need to step up. Now is the moment they need to let go. Now is the moment I need to step up. In real time, trying to identify when to do those things when you're also facing like life and death situations. And then there's that whole component to it. It's like, it's not realistic. So hierarchies are more practical just because there's a checks and balances to it. And there's like, I've been there and done that. So now I theoretically get promoted to the next thing. So anyways, I thought that was the theme that we should discuss. Let's get to the quick hitters of these movies and we will be out of here, Will. All right. Going back to the Mutiny on the Bounty, memorable quotes. I've got one that I thought was kind of fun. Captain William Bligh said, "What's your name?" Thomas Ellison said, "Sir." Thomas Ellison, sir. Pressed into service. I've got a wife and a baby. And Captain William Bligh said, "I asked your name, not the history of your misfortunes."
All
you might
on
not agree with that.
I guess.
I was going to say, you might not agree with that sentiment, but I thought it was still funny nonetheless. So
no, that's what I mean though. Is Bligh? It's his fault. It's your fault. I have these misfortunes, you jackass. But yeah.
Anything from either movie? Any quotes that you had?
Well, I mean, his speech at the end, Byam's speech, is I thought incredible. I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but essentially breaks down to like, if you're going to have authority, you need to do the right thing with it. And I think that just kind of sums up like leadership in general, going through this in my own personal, professional life right now. Like if there's just good leadership, you can make it just makes the whole thing work more efficiently and makes the people want to stick around. So it just, that it all breaks down to like people who get into authority need to do the right thing with it. Otherwise, this is what happens.
Yeah, because the whole final, during that speech and even the moments leading up to it, like you see these moments where Byam can basically rat on on Bligh, and say, no, he was awful. There's a reason there was a mutiny. You know what I mean? Because they are giving him the chance, and they're he speaks so eloquently, that you think there's a door here, but because he's trying, like, he's almost indoctrined to not do that, right? To not squeal on anyway. But the problem with that type of thinking structure is kind of what's happening right now, is where then you rely on the narrative of the person creating the oppression to be the morality of truth, and to be the person that, it's only his word now. And now it ultimately will end, Byam's life if they didn't go the other route. So it would have killed him. And then at that point, it's too late. You know what I mean? So it's just fascinating that even towards the end, when he realizes that his life is on the line, he still believes in the structure that is ultimately failed him.
Yeah.
That's
right. That's perfect.
That's something. Yeah, that's something in its own. Hard-hitting questions. I had none for either movie. What about you?
I mean, the obvious one we already kind of talked about, with the wannabe love scene between Christian and Byam on the beach. I'm convinced that there was the director was doing something there, and maybe Gable just wasn't aware of what was going on, but everybody watching knew.
You do realize this is how, like, Saturday Night Live got created. There's two guys sitting in a room, buddies. They're watching this movie that's really popular. Everybody in the world's watching it, and they go, "We've got to change that scene."
Right.
Doppelgangers. I thought there was a lot of repeat ones, though, that I've seen. One that stood out to me, though, not so much after the camera zoomed in on him, but when we first meet Hottie or whatever, the Prince of Tahiti, when he's first on his, like, raft coming in, which, by the way, who doesn't want to be greeted when you go to Tahiti? Because apparently they just greet everybody that way, which is amazing. Yeah. But at first I was like, he looked like Joshua Jackson with, like, all this weird like facial hair on him, but when he got on board, he did not. So that's all I had for doppelgangers.
Gotcha. Well, I didn't have any until the last 45 minutes. I've been staring at Olivia de Havilland, and this picture on IMDb, she looks a lot like Helen Bonham Carter.
Ooh.
I was a little surprised by that, but nothing from the actual movies. So
let's just see if anybody else has shared your thoughts. A lot of times you get like a side-by-side.
Oh, yeah.
Nope. Nothing. Nobody else has had that thought with you, Will.
Okay.
Let's move on to, should this movie have been drafted in hindsight? I say yes for both of them. I'm sure you'll do the same. The bigger question is this a rewatch, a scene study, or a forget it? I think Mutiny on the Bounty is a rewatch, where I think you can get a scene study from the other one. You've already used the term rewatch with Captain Bligh. Are you standing by that?
Yeah. No, this one feels more like a rewatch to me because it doesn't. I guess there's two types of rewatch in this case, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the rewatch you rewatch to kind of glean more from it. And then there's the rewatch that's like, hey, this is on. This is a pretty good, fun film. And that's what Captain Bligh is to me. But both are rewatchable. I
saw Oppenheimer in film or theaters 3 times. I'm not sure a lot of people can say that they went and saw that movie 3 times. It's an amazing movie, but like the subject material might not be worth a 3-hour movie a second time, right?
Sure.
So
fix
it in one move. I've already kind of spoke about what I would do with both films. I think maybe a little bit more resistance on Captain Bligh, and then the way fix kind of just a little bit more at stake at the end of the movie, make a decision and not kind of go both ways with it at the end of Mutiny on the Bounty. What about you, Will?
No, I'm right there with you. I think those are the best ones, honestly, because with Mutiny, if you just get some resolution on what Bligh's character actually is, I think the movie could have been that all-time type of movie. So, yeah,
it does feel like it's like knocking on the door, but it just quite doesn't get there. Yep. What other movies did it remind you of? Either one. I thought Captain Blood reminded me of Mutiny on the Bounty.
Okay. Yes.
Just joking. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, Captain Blood, the obvious Pirates, the Caribbean is right there. There's, I haven't seen Master and Commander in a long time, but there's a lot. Master and Commander has a lot in common with Mutiny on the Bounty, so that's another film that kind of popped in my head.
Is that the Giamatti film?
No, it's Russell Crowe. Russell
What am I
Crowe's
thinking
Master.
of? Okay.
I'm not sure.
Giamatti feels like he was in one of those. Maybe he was just Benjamin Franklin in the movie. I don't know.
He's John Adams in the miniseries.
John Adams. That's the poster I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing.
Okay.
It reminded me a little bit of Training Day, not for the movie at all, as far as like the images and what you're seeing,
Sure.
but like kind of the differences and contrast of doing things. And when you talked about Byam, you're more fascinated with where he would be. Does he get closer to a Clark Gable? Does he get closer to a Bligh? You know what I mean? And that's kind of what happens with Hawk's character in Training Day. And I always love it when movies can do that effectively. So
Right.
But one hot take. I think it's a hot take, so I'm just gonna put it out there. Frank Tone stole the movie for me. I thought if it was a horse race, he kind of nudged his nose before the other two just a little bit at the end. I'm not 100% sure that I'm gonna feel that way after a second watch, but I definitely thought he was a sneaky winner of this movie. Yeah.
No, that's a good one. I don't have a really good one that borders on lukewarm. So I don't have a good hot take for you on this one.
The only other issue I had with Mutiny on the Bounty is it felt like Stewart and Byam and the other there was like a third guy. They all kind of looked similar. So early on, I kind of struggled to know who was who when you're trying to figure out names. But like, didn't you think especially Stewart and Byam looked a little bit alike?
Yeah. Yep. There was the same issue in Captain Blood with a couple of the background guys where it was just, it always happens when you have a big kind of background cast like that. If they don't get a lot of speaking parts, it's hard to kind of differentiate sometimes.
And remember, it's still black and white. So like, you're not getting a lot of things that can pop off the screen. So that probably that's probably harder, easier said than done when it comes to fixing those things. All right, well, that's it for Captain Blood and the Mutiny on the Bounty. We've got one film left, and it is an international film that I think I might have put on the docket, but I don't think I had to pull your arm. So you tell me what's up next for us.
Yeah, so the last film in 1935 is An Inn in Tokyo. It's directed by Yasujiro Uzu. An unemployed Japanese man and his two sons wander the industrial flatlands of Depression-era Tokyo until he chances upon an old friend and befriends a woman and her daughter who are in a similar predicament. So it just kind of sounds like we get a little taste of what Depression-era Japan looks like. Also, it sounds like, I was reading a little bit about Ozu before the podcast, and this is considered his best silent film, but he's more well known for his his talkies that he gets into in the late 40s and the early 50s. So if we really like this, it might give us a little avenue for exploration in the future.
There's a gigantic Japanese cinema movement that's coming up. And we might be in the beginning stages of that, or you know what I mean, that's coming up, that has a huge influence on Hollywood movies that come later on.
Sure.
I think about like the Seven Samurai and things like that. Those have a huge, that's Japanese, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a huge impact that's getting ready to come down in a lot of remakes, or not remakes, but like Hollywood makes of those types of films. So we're about, this won't be one of them, I'm sure, but like, I am curious. I did not know this was a silent film until you said that. So, what will we be like kind of reprogramming ourselves down that road again? Right. It probably works a little better because we don't speak Japanese. So,
yeah, there you go.
But all right, for the rest of you, you know where to find us, and watch and in Tokyo. We'll talk about it next week on the show.
All right, we'll see you.
All right, keep watching movies.